the blockchain experience. Bringing dope content to the audience. Welcome to the blockchain experience. Bringing dope content to the audience. It's the blockchain spell made of David's got some.
Hello, GM, and welcome to another episode of the Blockchain Experience. I'm your host, Meta David. Before we get into the show, I just wanted to make one big announcement. We now have a show producer, so I'd like to welcome Carrie to the staff of the Blockchain Experience. She's worked at NBC Universal and just brings experience to the show that I frankly lack. She's been a rock star so far, and I'm super thankful to have her on. So again, welcome, Carrie. Now let's get to today's guest, Mitchell Chan. This is one of the best interviews I've done. Mitchell's actually created NFTs before they were called NFTs, before CryptoPunks. He's a real OG. He's a new media artist who has created work that is both on-chain and off-chain. I found Mitchell to be super thoughtful in the work that he does, and he had just like so many profound things to say in the course of our interview. He has a drop coming out called The Boys of Summer on August 16th, and that's going to be on wild.xyz. The link's going to be in the show notes. The project has been over a year in the making, so it is art, but there's a playability aspect to it too that we talk about during the interview. And the way he's implemented is just so interesting. And like after the interview, I felt that the game could be a metaphor for so many things in life. Anyway, I don't want to give any more spoilers, so we'll talk about that during the interview in just a little bit. And then shout outs, of course, for minting the last episode of the podcast. But before we do all that, a word from our sponsors. Ledger is the smartest way to secure crypto holdings. Their hardware wallets are trusted by over 4 million customers. Ledger can be used to secure, store, and manage over 1,800 crypto assets. Using the Ledger Live app, you will have a one-stop shop for your crypto needs. Buy, sell, exchange, and grow your assets with Ledger's partners securely and easily. Stop getting your wallet drained. Head over to ledger.metadavideth.com and take self-custody today. Have you ever wanted to display your NFT art in the physical world? Look no further than TokenFrame. TokenFrame's patent high-quality physical displays start at 10 inches and run all the way up to 55 inches. They're truly built for authenticity. Just sign in with your wallet, connect to Wi-Fi, and cast your NFTs. It's really that simple. And best of all, no subscriptions. TokenFrame supports Ethereum, Polygon, and Solana with Tezos on the way soon. It's no wonder they're trusted by OpenSea, SuperRare, Nifty Gateway, and more. Start flexing your NFT art by visiting tokenframe.metadavideth.com. Again, that's tokenframe.metadavideth.com. Mitchell, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks so much. Excited to be here, David.
Yeah, excited to have you. So I know you've got a collection coming out on August 16th called The Boys of Summer, which we'll get to in a little bit. But for the benefit of our listeners, can you give us an introduction?
Sure. I'm Mitchell F. Chan. I'm talking to you from Toronto. I've been a new media artist for a long time now, probably, like over 15 years now. And what that means is that I have throughout my career made art using different technologies, and I have made art about different technologies and how different technologies are affecting our lives and society in general. I'm here in the sense of, being in the NFT space, as they say, because in 2017, the technology that I was interested in exploring and the technology that I was interested in talking about was blockchain technology. And in 2017, I created, what is now considered one of the first tokenized fine art objects, which was called Digital Zones of Immaterial Pictorial Sensibility. And, that was the beginning of my interest in blockchain as a medium and blockchain as an artistic subject. And that, continues on today. Since then, I've produced projects on Artblocks. My last project before this was also a video game. It was called Winslow Homer's Croquet Challenge, and that was presented by the Buffalo AKG Art Museum. And now, I've continued being at the intersection of fine art, games, and of course, blockchain technology with Boys of Summer. It's this hybrid transmedia project. A lot of moving parts. It entails a PFP collection an interactive game art NFT, and this networked performance that everyone participates in. And it's about the quantification of self, it's about data as commodity, and it's about baseball.
So are all your drops so far on-chain, or are they kind of a hybrid of both on-chain and off-chain? Because you mentioned Artblocks, and I did see the collection there, and we could talk a little bit about that, which I know is going to be on-chain. So is that your jam, like on-chain, or you do kind of both?
Definitely a hybrid. And I would say it's so funny, obviously we go through these narrative moments, right? On-chain, in-chain, on-chain, become these big moments and narratives build around them. And there is some talk, particularly with Digital Zones, a 2017 artwork, right? That was just, essentially a smart contract artwork, with tokens, early non-fungible tokens. People saying, well, this is an example of real on-chain artwork. And I have a lot of respect for the kind of technological innovations that happen when artists work within the constraints of the Ethereum virtual machine and make on-chain artwork. That's really cool. But, my artwork is about exploring sort of all the possibilities of like the intersection of blockchain, which means that I can't be prescriptive about one particular approach to a technology. I have to go where the story takes me. So Digital Zones, is that an on-chain artwork? I've argued with people that is the most off-chain artwork, right, that can possibly exist. Because one of the points I was trying to make about the tokenization of artworks way back 6 years ago, before people were tokenizing artworks, was that the power of it was that token, that on-chain token, can be linked to, like, can confer rights over anything. Like anything in the world, right? Like conceptual art, performance art, the ephemera, gestures that exist for a brief moment in this real world. Like that's the real power of it, as opposed to limiting oneself to just what is possible within the very limited sandbox of the Ethereum virtual machine.
That's such an interesting take, because at current state, I think we take it for granted that like it could be either one, whether it's on-chain or off-chain. And from what you described, it seemed like you were a trailblazer in the sense that like, hey, you can do things off chain, which I would almost argue is kind of like the norm. Like there's way more off chain things than like on chain. And to your point, there's always this like flip-flopping narrative between like, which one's better. And from what you described there, I don't think like either one is better necessarily. They're just different, and they have different use cases, and you can apply them different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when we say most things are off chain, right? By that, you're normally the way that we normally understand that in the NFT space is, there's an image and the image isn't saved in the Ethereum blockchain. It's on IPFS and we have a token hash in it, right? But there are different degrees in that, and that's fine. But even that's not, I mean, that's just kind of the obvious thing to do. What I'm talking about more is tokens having the ability to solve the problem of how, if it ever was a problem, but I think it was a problem, of how we commodify even more ethereal things than a JPEG image, right? So you take, for instance, a piece of performance art, right? And it was like, so let's suppose you have a beautiful piece of performance art, like say Cut Piece by Yoko Ono. This is a seminal artwork in which Yoko Ono stood in the middle of the gallery doing nothing with a pair of scissors in front of her and the instructions written on a piece of paper, cut. People would come up and they would take the scissors and they would cut off maybe just a piece of her shirt. Some people would, maybe cut off a piece of her hair. And then there'd be really, really frightening moments where like, some idiot would think it was really funny to like stand there threateningly, or maybe cut off the piece of her shirt that was holding it up. And then she had to sort of cover herself up, right? These are really important artworks that, of course, have never been able to exist in a marketplace. And some people would say it's good, and it's good that they can't exist in a marketplace, but ultimately we need to figure out a way to, let artists make a living and stuff like that. How would you ever sell something like that? And my notion about tokens was that, well, because actually we can't put big files and stuff in the blockchain, like don't think of it as a way to store your picture of a frog. Like the collectors, people in the blockchain space, like they're smart enough to understand the social convention that no, this token that, bears the irrevocable signature of the artist is linked to that idea that's out there in the real world or even some kind of metaphysical world.
When you say it's linked to an idea, so you don't necessarily mean like a URL, a pointer, it could just be something a little bit more like abstract than that, or?
Yeah, it's a certificate of authenticity, all right? And the art world gave us myriad examples of using certificates of authenticity in a innovative way, right? The reason why my project on Artblocks was about Sol LeWitt and was evoking the artist Sol LeWitt was because he was another leader in the idea of using certificates of authenticity, where if you bought one of his pieces were these big drawings that, the museum would have to put on their walls, right? And when the museum buys the artwork, they're not taking the wall out of his studio. Actually, that drawing doesn't exist yet. He has a set of instructions and he says, these are the instructions for how to do it. Here's my signature, which is a certificate of authenticity. Like, you go do it. And then that's the artwork. Like, the certificate imbues this idea with a certain degree of weight, legitimacy. Right. And this is fine. Like it's fine that there was no hash, right? It's fine that the certificate wasn't attached to a box, that it wasn't permanently crazy glued to a box. And then inside the box was definitely the art, right? The relationship and the legacy, of the artist can do a lot of work for you.
Do you see any parallels there between like just art and other things in general, like outside of the art domain, where like you can own something, but you don't necessarily own it like in a physical sense or even in a non-tangible sense, if that question makes sense, that it could be a certificate of authenticity to just represent like an idea or notion?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, the art world has done, like I said, really interesting examples of that. In the real world, it's harder, I think, to find examples of that. But we do it, look, we do it sort of all the time in maybe less glamorous ways. If you've ever donated to a charity and you get a certificate that says like you have sponsored a certain family, or that you have bought a milk cow and a goat for a village somewhere else in a less developed part of the world, we understand that those things actually do have value, because the idea of owning that phenomenon, has some value to people, and not even in a really crass capitalistic way. There's a different type of value that is sometimes not so easily quantifiable or enumerable. And some art projects have made really profound statements about that. And in fact, so my first NFT, Digital Zones, in 2017, was very much about that, about the possibility of owning sensibilities and ideas.
So 2017 is very early in the game, especially when we talk about like tokenization and the way that you described it. How did you, what's the genesis story behind that, if I can ask? Like, how did you come up with it? How did you even find out about NFTs and tokenization and that sort of thing?
Well, I didn't find out about NFTs because NFTs didn't exist yet, right?
Yeah,
I'm working on this before CryptoPunks. I wrote a 33-page essay about this piece, Digital Zones, and the words non-fungible never appear because they simply weren't in the lexicon, right? Mm-hmm. And how do I come across it? I mean, this is the job of an artist, is to see interesting things happening in the world and think about what they mean. And then, manifest your understanding into some object that people can look at or interact with, or collect, right? So how do I think about tokenization? How do I arrive at these ideas of an NFT? Honestly, by necessity, because I look at blockchain and I see that blockchain is simply it is the exchange of some kind of value, which is most definitely immaterial. Whatever value a Bitcoin has, it certainly is not related to a quantity of minerals in the earth, right? And is certainly not even related to a centralized government. You cannot point to where that value comes from. It is, if we are being honest, and especially at that time, I think the culture has changed a lot since then, but the value of a Bitcoin was the exact sum, the enumeration, the quantification of all of the faith and belief that a community of holders had in it. That is radical. Like that, but that's what it is, right? Like, this is the exact measure of how much people believe in this, right? And the measurement is, about like, a $200 billion market cap. That's nuts. What an insane thing to be able to quantify. So that's much more interesting to me than, so much more interesting to me than, encryption technology. That's much more interesting to me than a distributed ledger, is a quantification of faith. But I look at that and I say, oh, well, actually, art understands this really well. It's so weird, right? I mean, we know even still today, people can't really understand Bitcoin or the value proposition of Bitcoin, but art understands it really well because art has tried to quantify faith and put faith and ideas into a bucket that can be passed around and bought and sold and transacted a whole bunch of times. So I decide I'm going to do that explicitly, right? Using, art historical projects as a reference. And the reference that I used was Yves Klein. And I realized that to make these, conceptual art systems happen, where the conceptual artist Yves Klein, would make paper receipts numbered, therefore unique and non-fungible paper receipts for ideas that he had in the world, invisible artworks. It's like, okay, to represent that on the blockchain and show that blockchain is just an extension of this, well, I have to do a couple of things. All right, here's a Solidity contract. I guess I got to change it. I guess I got to make sure that each of these tokens are unique and indivisible and they can't be like, and we keep track of who has which one. And this could be a model for art in the future, hypothetically. I don't think it's ever going to happen at that time. Like I didn't think there would actually be widespread adoption of tokenization of art, but that's how it comes, right? Like you have an idea and then like necessity drives the technological innovation.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was going to ask some philosophical questions about like how you see that versus like fiat, but I'll spare you.
No, those are great questions.
Well, let's get into it then. I mean, is there really a distinction in that sense between fiat currency and cryptocurrency?
I kind of understand where you're going with that. And fiat currency, what's funny is that fiat currency is already incredibly close to like the value system that exists in Bitcoin or Ethereum, right? And Bitcoin's a better example, right? Because Bitcoin doesn't have the kind of utility that Ether has, right? As payment for doing computation. So Bitcoin is a better example. And it's already really, really close. Like in terms of what it means philosophically. It is just adopted by a group of people who choose not to let like that faith be centralized in a particular government, right? And this actually evolution of monetary policy was a big part of what I was looking at, what I was researching in those early blockchain experiments, because there's a thread of history, right, that goes something like this. And this is the way the sort of academics, or at least a very small number of academics that I was reading, choose to think about it, right? Which is in the beginning we have gold, and gold is a thing. Gold is irrefutably a thing, right? Even if it's not a particularly useful thing, like you can make jewelry out of it and conduct electricity, I suppose. But, it is most definitely a thing. It's a physical thing. And then you have currency that is on the gold standard. Each dollar must be a signifier for a certain quantity of gold that is held in a vault in Fort Knox or somewhere else. So this is still a direct signifier. And at the time that I was making digital zones in 2017, I was reading this French philosopher, Jean-Joseph Joux. And he then points out that then what fiat currency is you sever the tie to anything real. All right. And money becomes, what, they would call in those sort of like post-structuralist academic circles, a free-floating signifier. All right. A dollar bill used to mean a certain amount of gold. But with fiat currency, all right, the real value is that it can mean, as a free-floating signifier, to put it simply, it can mean anything, right? Today, it could mean right now, it could mean, a chocolate bar. And then 5 minutes from now, it could mean like 1/3 of a steak, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And there was this idea that actually, at the times when we've changed monetary policy, art has changed as well. And he says, it's no surprise that when we embraced abstraction in money, the fact that one thing could represent many other things, that's also the time we started to embrace abstraction in art, right? Cubism like emerges, right? Abstract expressionism emerges because society is just ready for the idea that something doesn't have to have a one-to-one connection of signifying something else. It can signify many different things. These are massive social paradigm shifts that exist in monetary policy, but also in art.
As an undergrad, I majored in economics. That's why I think like these kinds of conversations are very profound, but I wasn't aware. I didn't really think through that paradigm shift that you just described where these things were changing, monetarily were changing, and at the same time, art was changing too. So I got to process that after we're done recording. It's really actually interesting.
Yeah, it's a niche theory.
Yeah. It's a niche theory, but I mean, it's theory, but it seems like something that I'd love to explore, and I got to read more about because I just kind of never really saw like the connection between the two. I guess because my brain kind of just siloed into two different categories. So, but that's really interesting. But anyways, you do have like a collection dropping on Wild.
Yeah.
On August 16th. And I looked through it. Looks really interesting. And so I can say as a kid, baseball was a huge part of my childhood. Not only did I collect like the baseball cards, but during the summer, even if we couldn't make it out to a baseball field, like we'd make like a makeshift baseball field out of the yard. And instead of using like our metal bats or wooden bats, we'd use like plastic ones and a wiffle ball. So just like the mere title of like, and looking at the art and, we're going to talk about its playability, but it triggers some nostalgia. So for you, like, were there some elements of like your childhood and some personal things that you like injected into that?
A little bit. So I do have a bit of a background with baseball. I was never a big baseball player, but, when I was a teenager, right, I used to take the bus to Montreal to go see Vladimir Guerrero Sr., playing for the Expos, who's just the coolest baseball player, man. He was amazing. Didn't wear gloves. He'd swing at anything. He was great. And one summer when I was in college, I had this summer job. I was actually a statistician for Bill James's company, Baseball Info Solutions. Super low-level part-time job. And the way it worked at that time was he was trying to amass pitch-by-pitch data, everywhere, but also in the minor leagues, of course, right? And, those things wouldn't exist in official scorekeeper records. So, there's literally an ad on Craigslist. And, if you replied, you'd get $20 to go out and watch a minor league baseball game. And you had to just keep pitch by pitch stats, in what order did the balls and strikes come? If the batter hit the ball, what part of the field did they hit it to, et cetera. So I did that for a little bit and, for one summer. And I lean on that a little bit. But the real secret of this project, right, Boys of Summer, is that it's less about, it's about my personal experience as much as it's about your personal experience or anybody else's personal experience. Anybody's personal experience of existing in a world of data. And the secret of Boys of Summer is that, it's a baseball project and, you get your PFP and they're a baseball player. They got a ball cap. They're holding they're holding a hat. You log into this game and you're playing, you're putting points and you're hitting and your power and your base running, whatever. But the secret is like, it's not actually about baseball, right? Baseball is a Trojan horse. It's just a way that I lead you to the point about the larger world, like the world that is everywhere, the world where you, like Vladimir Guerrero Jr., are a collection of statistics that are more or less valued by the powers that be.
So it is a PFP, but it's a playable PFP from what you're describing, right?
Yeah. So here's the mechanics of how it works, right? Most people will engage with this by owning a PFP. There are 999 of them. So it's a nice, like, small batch PFP collection. Like, obviously I didn't want to go, 10K because you want like a real community, I think, of like art appreciators. And you get this PFP and, when listeners look them up, they'll see like, they're cute. They use a lot of the PFP tropes. They're done in this sort of 3D style that I've used a lot in my recent video game work. And they have baseball caps or they have glasses and things like this. But you'd probably notice if you were looking at it on OpenSea that they don't have any attribute metadata. All right. So there's no field where you can sort them by who has glasses or who has beards or mustaches or hats or anything like that. They just have a name and a position. So maybe, you have, Mitch Chan, right fielder. or something like that. And then that's it. Like, that's your PFP, and it's a good PFP. However, where the PFP becomes an artwork is that there's this other part of the project, and it's this one-of-one unique tokenized video game. And you can connect to the video game, and if you connect with your wallet, then you can play the game using your PFP. And as you play the game with your PFP, so now all of a sudden Mitch Chan, right fielder or whatever, is in the game, and you get to, there's some RPG-like elements. Like I say, you put points into different attributes, and depending on how you put your points in the attributes, it makes your numbers go up, right? This is the thing that we love about following sports is statistics. Your batting average goes up, or your home runs go up, or whatever. And this continues. And as you continue, there's more information to put in. Oh, what's your training schedule? And then your numbers will go up more. But then the numbers get more and more and more esoteric. And I won't give away, like, I won't totally spoil how it goes, but the numbers start to get really strange until we're painting this really detailed portrait of this person's life, like not just as a baseball player, but as a person. And then what happens is all of those statistics, as you play the game, they get saved to your PFP's metadata. So now when you go and look at your character on OpenSea, you don't just see Mitch Chan right fielder. You see Mitch Chan right fielder, 268 batting average, 11 home runs, 13 stolen bases, 12 times caught stealing, 3.6 ultimate zone rating for 0.2 wins above replacement. But the numbers become very intimate. What is your net worth? What's your average income? You know, the number of, your, et cetera, et cetera. And so it goes on like that. And so it's this entirely networked performance.
Are they interconnected in any way? Like, are the PFPs ever like playing each other, or are they operating in isolation?
You know, not within this scope of the game, right? The artwork is a standalone artwork that people can just engage with on their own. Because, you know, one of the big challenges, I think, with any sort of, when you say the words game and blockchain together, people get this notion of some kind of like PvP type situation. And I don't like that, right? I don't like that at all. You play the game to explore the artwork, because the artwork is interesting and engaging. So there's no direct, in-game competition between people. Now, that being said, one of the statements about the game is that, of course, after you play the game, you've generated a whole bunch of statistics, and everybody else has generated a whole bunch of statistics. And those are all out on marketplaces, right? You can't help it. Like, they're on OpenSea. So is there a PvP game? Oh, heck yeah. But it's the meta game, right? It's the ecto game. And so now on OpenSea, oh yeah, of course. Like, David, you probably want your character to have hit more home runs than my character hit. That would probably make your PFP more valuable than mine. Unless the market decides that what they really value is SAT score, and you want your character to have a higher SAT score than mine. So that is the arena for the multiplayer game, is the market.
So do you have any theories as to what the market will value, or are you just going to kind of like stand back and just kind of observe what happens and let the market? I mean, of course, you're letting the market have that either scenario, but do you have any like theories on which like attributes might be the most desirable, or is this just kind of part of the experience, is this observing it all?
I have, in my time in blockchain, learned never to publicly state a prediction about what a market is going to do.
I had a feeling you'd say that.
Sorry, you're not going to get me on that one. It's not my first rodeo.
Okay, fair enough. So what I find interesting is that as an artist, you could easily just like, and I don't mean to oversimplify this, but you could make like a piece, a hand-drawn piece, and then, you know, put it out there. But to code something and make it like playable, I'm assuming it takes a lot more work and time into doing that, right? I mean, because you have to consider, I mean, it's just like you have to consider like UI and a whole bunch of different elements.
Oh, yeah.
So why are you doing that? I mean, like, what's your motivation? What's your what's driving you to do that?
Oh boy, let me see if I can, you know, answer this without sounding like a blowhard. But because the answer does kind of sound ridiculous, which is that like I believe in art, and I believe in making great art, and I want to be a great artist. And it's like, yeah, I could draw a whole bunch of like cartoon faces with mustaches and call it PFP collection and put it out there. But that's not what I'm interested in, right? Like, so yeah, and your question, does it take a long time? I mean, heck yes. I've been working on this project for almost a year, and, uniquely in my situation, I mean, I guess maybe not that uniquely, but I made a decision about my career as soon as, NFTs took off, and I was fortunate enough to do well and have some support there, that I didn't want to hire any assistants. I didn't want to have a studio. The joy of my art practice is making art. Like, that's what I enjoy doing. So if I can afford to not have assistants and instead just have time and write every line of code myself and model every character myself, that's the best thing I could ask for. And I think that people connect with that. And certainly I connect with that as my life. And in terms of just making it the hard way, like, that's what you have to do if you have a statement that you're really passionate about making. Listen, every artist in this space thinks they have an opinion or perspective on something, which means that opinions or perspectives are not particularly valuable. They're super abundant. And so when you're communicating your opinion or perspective, what matters a lot is showing your viewer, yeah, but how much conviction do you have in this opinion? Is this idea really that important to you? And the best way you can show that is to, one, either be consistent and stick with, that idea or evolve that idea throughout your entire career for decades and decades and decades. And also to put in a lot of work. I believe this artwork says something about the culture that we live in. And if you're doubting my sincerity, like, damn, look at how much went into it. I must feel pretty strongly about it.
So in terms of like the imagery, I know that you have a collection, Winslow Homer's Croquet of Summer.
Winslow Homer's Croquet Challenge.
Croquet Challenge. I'm sorry, I conflated two different, just realized I conflated two different collections there. So regarding that one, obviously that one was inspired by Winslow Homer's art, of course. For this collection, is it inspired by a particular painter or artist?
No, this is the starting point. The starting point with this one is baseball, right? There's no starting, where it's like with Winslow Homer's Croquet Challenge, the previous art game NFT I put out, it sort of took the American painter Winslow Homer as a starting point to tell a story about the time that he lived in, which was Reconstruction America, and the time we live in now. But with this one, we use baseball as a starting point. It's a much friendlier starting point. And one of the things that I really believe in my art is that, my art talks about, really complicated ideas. And so you want to give people the friendliest entry point to that. And baseball is just a good entry point, but there's no particular artistic reference here.
So a couple of questions. So I noticed that with the Croquet Challenge one, anyone could kind of like play it, right? Like I could hop on there, play it. I tried playing it. It was pretty cool. For the Boys of Summer collection, is it like anyone can play it, but only once you connect your wallet, the metadata gets stored, or how does that look like?
So one of the things that I believe in my art, if digital art can do one thing, it is to make art accessible to everybody, whether you can walk to the museum and afford a ticket or not. So yeah, I mean, the game part. So of course, I mean, every PFP is viewable by everybody, just like every other NFT. The game, the unique tokenized artwork, that's playable by anyone. All right. And that's important. But the difference is that if you own the PFP, then you can play the game with your wallet connected and participate in that performance of saving your metadata for the character. So that's the big difference. So I think that people who own the PFP, they get a lot more out of the game because they're participating in this performance art piece. And it's like the game actually, in my opinion, it turns their token from a PFP into an actual artwork. Like that's the moment it becomes art, right? So you get that extra out of it if you connect to the game with your PFP. But it's very important to me that even people who can't do that, or even people who missed out on the PFP drop, can still experience the ideas by doing a non-saving playthrough.
It'll also be interesting. I'm going to be watching to see how much value is put into, well, we talked a little bit about this, so we talked about the attributes, but I would also be kind of curious to see how much value is put on the tokens that haven't been played at all, like connection, like no connected wallet, and see like where the market values those.
So let me say something about that, because that was something that I thought about a lot. And it was a concern for me, right? And it's something that I call like the QQL effect, right? Where
I was thinking exactly QQL, yeah.
And QQL, super innovative project, tons of respect for Dandelion and Tyler Hobbs for putting it out there. But, they put a lot of effort in that project. And I don't want to speak for them, but I'm sure like it's not fun for them to see 75% of those like mint passes never turn into art, right? And I didn't want that. So what I did was I made the data rewritable. If you do multiple playthroughs of the game, you can write new statistics. You can get a better run. So there's really no advantage to keeping your piece pristine. Like, please go, like, use the art, man. It's there to be used.
Oh, that's a very good piece of alpha there for our listeners to know, is that it's not permanent, so to speak, in the sense that, if you have like a low batting average, that particular player will have like a low batting average, or it would be hard to dig out of that batting average. So it sounds like they can kind of be reset then, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Very cool. So just a few more questions. So first and foremost, where can people find the Boys of Summer?
You can find the Boys of Summer at wild.xyz.
Okay. And then the drop date is August 16th. And then what's the mint price?
Mint price is going to be 0.12 ETH for a collection of 999.
And is there an allow list?
There is an allow list. So again, if you go to wild.xyz, and I strongly encourage people to get on that allow list, because, I want people to get it, and we're concerned it might be a bit competitive.
Okay. All right. We'll make sure to include that in the show notes. So one last question before we part. What advice would you have for just aspiring, artists entering into this space, making that, transition from, let's say like physical art into generative art or digital art, what have you?
So artists who are entering from the world of physical art, I mean, my advice to them would be to like spend as much time understanding blockchain and understanding digital technologies as you spent understanding paint or clay or whatever was your medium before. Like, I'm a big believer in medium specificity. If you're going to work with a tool, you better have a reason why you're doing that. And ideally, your choice of tool relates to the message that you're trying to send, relates to what you are trying to say. So make sure, like, people, you can't come into digital art thinking, oh, this is just easy. Now this is easy. It's just JPEGs. It's just pictures, of my work, right? Have a thing to say. Think about how your thing to say relates to the medium that you are native in. And that would be my biggest advice.
Authenticity, it seems like, just, being true to yourself.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, Mitchell, really appreciate you hopping on the pod. I know that you've got a lot going on with the upcoming launch. I'm super impressed by not only your collections, but just like your perspective on blockchain and like how you entered the space. Very compelling story that I got to like process a lot of what you said, and got things kind of turning in my mind because there's some profound things that you said that I think our listener, I certainly appreciate, and I think our listeners will do. So appreciate you coming on, man.
Well, thanks so much, David. It was a pleasure to be here.
And now it's time for the shout outs. Hopefully you all enjoyed that interview with Mitch as much as I did. He's just such a super thoughtful talent in this space who's pioneering and doing amazing things. So super grateful to have him on the show. So yes, now it's time for the shout outs. As you might know, each episode is available on Nifty Gateway. It's only $1 and that covers gas, and it's available on the Ethereum network. So it's an awesome deal. The intent here by making it available to Mint is so that I, as a podcaster, can get greater visibility into who the show supporters are and reward you guys for your support. And one of those rewards is the shout outs that I'm about to get into. So this particular episode had 230 mints, which is the highest we've seen so far. So thank you guys so much for all the love. I do want to acknowledge some whales who minted a lot of episodes, and those whales are CL7, Kapuli, Fred Kavor, arts design. So guys, thank you so much for your support. It just means the world to us at the Blockchain Experience, and we appreciate you so much. And some folks that did mint also were AK Denise, TLD Mart, also known as Mr. Scott, so maybe that's an office reference. Andre Decalife, the artist, the Rev, a Bored Ape and a former guest on the show, JML222, SJS Inc., a friend of the show, loyal minter, thank you. Oscar Machinery, Bay, I think that's BEH. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Sir Goat, also a dear friend of the show. DVD Dan, dear friend of the show. I think I butchered that. DV Dan. All right. I went back to an old habit. Dutch345, Emil MTO, dear friend of the show, amazing artist. RJD, someone who started minting the episodes as soon as they appeared on Nifty Gateway. Thank you. Gold Coin admires good art. Love that name. Thank you for minting. Crazy Artist, Thomas Schron, Enable 92, Gainy Med 888, Tuggy, I think who's a new minter to the show. Welcome. Danielle Patel, Inceptionally, who's a dear friend of the show and also a former guest. Mako 345, Cha Cha 20, Cyber C, an amazing generative artist, and Shine Loose. So those are all the people I was able to track, and I thank you guys so much for your support and taking the time to mint the episode. Looking at the mint list, looks like the popular play here is to mint like 2 to 3, and I think that play makes a lot of sense. That's personally what I've been doing. I mint about 3 episodes minimum. The floors are well above, I don't want to say well's, all relative. I think the floors are generally at $5 and it costs $1 to mint. So you're certainly not losing money when you're minting. So not financial advice here, but, the hope here is that in the long run, these tokens that you're minting provide value. And when I say long run, I'm looking over horizon and the magnitude of like years, not months. So hopefully these will be vintage collectibles with long-term value for you guys. I will take a few minutes to say that since the new season has started, we've just been on a crazy, amazing trajectory. We currently are ranked in the top 2% of podcasts globally. We have hit the top 50 charts on Spotify US for the technology category a few times. It's more of a blip that we've, come in and out. We haven't really been able to sustain it. But I'll take it because it's really not too shabby for a podcast that's in a niche like Web3. If you look at the other podcasts on the top 50 list for Spotify US and technology category, they're just more high-level technology podcasts. I don't think too many of them are, in a niche category. So very thrilled to see that. So yeah, we've just been on an amazing growth trajectory, and we've been having a ton of requests from people and companies wanting to appear on the show. And I'll have to check with Carrie, but I think if we're not fully booked for the season, we're very close to it. And the season runs through the end of the year. The last episode will be on December 26th. So yeah, it's just been an amazing back half of 2023. So whether you mint 100 episodes or you mint 1 or you mint none and are just simply listening to the podcast on a platform of your choice, we really, really appreciate your support and listenership so much, and we'll continue to stay laser focused on bringing value to you all. So if you have any feedback for us, as always, don't hesitate to reach out to me, Carrie, or the Blockchain Experience Twitter account, or you can just simply go to our website, which is on the show notes, and contact us there. Thank you so much for your time, and until next time.
Welcome to the Blockchain Experience. Bringing dope content to the audience. Welcome to the Blockchain Experience. Bringing dope content to the audience. It's the blockchain spell made of David. Got so much to tell. Bringing you the latest news without fail. Hey, decentralized and secure. It's been making waves. You can't tamper with data. It's not the same old way. From finance to art, it's bringing all the trust. The blockchain experience, it's a must. Hey, welcome to the blockchain experience. Bringing dope content to the audience. give it up, give it up, give it up, give it up for the blockchain experience. It's a game changer. It's a game changer. Welcome to the blockchain experience, bringing dope content to the audience. Welcome to the blockchain experience, bringing dope content to the audience. It's a blockchain experience. It's a blockchain experience. It's a blockchain experience. Give it up, give it up, give it up for Major David. Give it up, give it up, give it up for Major David. Give it up, give it up, give it up for Major David. Give it up, give it up, give it up for Major David. Welcome to the blockchain experience, bringing dope content to the audience. Welcome to the blockchain experience, bringing dope content to the audience. Welcome to the blockchain experience, bringing dope content to the audience. Welcome to the blockchain experience, bringing dope content to the audience. To the blockchain experience.